She thought the park was safe, until the wind stopped, the world went silent, and a badge-wearing predator stepped out of the shadows. By the time the engine's growl echoed through Palm Hollow, the girl on the bench wasn't just a victim anymore. She was the reason justice was coming. The last light of day spilled across Palm Hollow Park in a molten glow, gilding the grass and turning the lake into a pane of glass. Autumn Wade sat alone on the weathered bench, her knees drawn close, the spine of a battered second-hand novel balanced between her fingers. She had come here for the quiet, for the way the breeze through the dying oaks seemed to hush the noise in her head. The world felt almost suspended, until it didn't. The wind stilled. The leaves stopped whispering. Even the birds went silent, and for one disorienting moment, Autumn realized she could hear nothing but her own breathing. That was when the boots sounded behind her, heavy, deliberate, coming closer. "What's a girl like you doing here alone in a place like this?" The voice was low, almost lazy, but it curled over her shoulder with the same weight as a hand. Autumn turned slowly, fingers still resting on her page, and saw them. Two officers, one tall, lean and fidgeting, like he didn't want to be there. The other, older, stockier, stood with a grin that wasn't really a grin at all. Luke Brener, his badge caught the last slant of sun and threw it in her face like a dare. "I'm just reading," Autumn said, her voice careful, even. "I'm not doing anything wrong." "Depends," Brener replied, stepping closer. "You got ID, sweetheart? Could be loitering. Could be casing the place. Never know these days." "This is a public park." Autumn blinked up at him, the words leaving her lips before she could stop them. "That's so." His chuckle was dry and mean. Funny how some folks think public means they get to sit around looking pretty and wasting space. Beside him, Officer Slater shifted, eyes darting toward the lake. He didn't add anything, didn't move, just stood there like someone watching a slow-motion crash. Autumn reached for her tote bag, slow, deliberate. "I have ID if you need it." Brener didn't take it, his grin sharpened. "Nah, I think we'll just do a visual inspection." It happened faster than she could react. A snap of his wrist, the baton flicking upward, catching the hem of her dress and tossing it high enough to bare her thighs to the cooling air. The sound of fabric whipping up was deafening in the silence. Autumn gasped and jerked backward, clutching the skirt down with both hands. The book slid from her lap, thudding onto the gravel path. Heat shot up her neck, not from the sun but from humiliation, raw and hot. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shouted, her voice cracking but not breaking. "You just assaulted me." "Assault?" Brener laughed, an ugly bark. "Lighten up. We're just having a little fun. It's Sunday, ain't it?" Slater let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a plea, then quickly looked away, Adam's apple bobbing like he was swallowing something sour. Autumn stood, not because she felt brave, but because she refused to stay small. "You think you can do this to anyone?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "Not anyone," Brener said, that smirk never leaving his face. "Just girls like you." The words hit her harder than the air on her skin. She felt her pulse thrum in her throat, her chest. She didn't run, didn't cry. She bent down, picked up her phone from her bag, and moved with quiet precision. It rang twice. "Maya," Autumn said, her voice tight but controlled. "I need you." There was silence on the line for a heartbeat. Then the voice that had once pulled her out of hell spoke. "Where?" "Palm Hollow," Autumn said. "East Playground bench. Don't move." Autumn hung up. She didn't look at Brener, didn't look at Slater. She sat back down, folded her skirt over her knees, and stared out at the lake with eyes that burned, not from tears, but from something older, sharper, waiting to be unleashed. The breeze picked up again, rustling through the oaks like the park itself had been holding its breath. Somewhere far off, a car engine growled, deep and low. Justice was coming, and for the first time, Brenner's grin faltered. The low growl of a V8 engine broke the stillness before anyone saw it. The sound came first, deep, deliberate, like a warning rolling across the park. Luke Brener's smirk faltered just a fraction as the black Dodge Charger emerged through the far service road, its headlights off but its presence undeniable. It cut across the gravel path with the precision of something that knew exactly where it was going. Autumn's heart thudded once, hard. She didn't turn her head, but the corner of her mouth lifted just slightly, as if she had been holding her breath until now. The car rolled to a stop, quiet as a coiled animal. The door opened and Maya Williams stepped out. She wasn't wearing full uniform, just a navy shirt under a civilian jacket, badge clipped to her belt, boots still dusty from the training field. But it didn't matter. She carried authority like a storm carries thunder. She didn't slam the door. She didn't raise her voice. She just alked, every step sounding louder than the last. 10 steps, 8, 5. The distance between them shrank until Brener had to turn to face her. Badge numbers, Maya said, her voice even, sharp enough to slice through the cooling air. Brener arched a brow, grin returning like a man who thought the joke was still his. Excuse me? You heard me, Maya replied, enunciating each word with steel. Name and badge number, now. Slater shifted uncomfortably, but Brener just laughed. And who exactly are you, sweetheart? Maya's hand moved with deliberate calm. She flipped open the black ID wallet at her hip, and the gold shield of internal affairs glinted in the dying sunlight. Sergeant Maya Williams, she said, off-duty, but not off-duty enough. Slater froze like a man who just realized the ground he was standing on wasn't solid. Ma'am, we were just... I'm not speaking to you yet, Maya cut in without looking at him. Her eyes stayed on Brener. Brenner's grin thinned. We had a loitering complaint. Loitering? Maya glanced at Autumn, who still sat with her book at her feet, skirt smoothed carefully back over her knees. She's holding a novel, not a crowbar. We had reason to... No, Maya said, stepping forward. You had opportunity. Don't confuse the two. From the corner of her eye, Autumn saw them, two joggers slowing to a stop, phones in hand, then a mother with a stroller, then a man walking his dog. People were gathering now, the kind of slow-forming crowd that smells trouble and refuses to look away. Did you touch her? Maya's voice was quiet now, dangerous in its calm. Brenner's jaw flexed. She's making things up. Then you won't mind if I pull the park's surveillance footage. Maya let the silence stretch for a moment. You are wearing your body cams, aren't you? Brener said nothing. Slater's voice cracked as he muttered, Mine's charging. Back at the station. Maya took another step, close enough now that Brener could see the reflection of himself in her mirrored sunglasses. Badge number, she said again. Autumn stood now, her voice steady as a knife edge. His name is Luke Brener, badge number 31478. His partner is James Slater, badge 30,952. I memorized them while they laughed. There was a murmur through the small crowd. Someone whispered, Good girl. Maya nodded once. Good. She turned back to Brener. IA officers will be here in 20 minutes. Anyone who saw what happened, stay. Your statements matter. Slater looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. Brenner's smirk was gone entirely now. His jaw clenched so tight a vein stood out in his neck. You're going to regret making this a show, he muttered. Maya didn't flinch. She stepped close enough that he could smell the dust on her jacket, close enough that the crowd could feel the charge in the air. No, she said softly, her words landing like a gavel. You regret it. I just showed up. Autumn's phone was still in her hand, and she realized she wasn't gripping it like a shield anymore. She slid it back into her tote and stood with Maya, shoulder to shoulder. For the first time since the skirt had flown, she felt tall. The playground behind them had gone completely still. No more swings creaking, no more chatter. Every eye was on them. And for the first time, Brener looked uneasy. Not because Maya had shown up, but because the entire park had. The sound of tires crunching on gravel came again. Faint but growing louder. Another car, this one unmarked, pulled in. Internal affairs backup. This wasn't just a tense moment anymore. It was a reckoning. And Brener could feel it closing in. The night air outside Palm Hollow's 9th District Station was colder than it should have been. Autumn Wade could feel it biting through her sweater as she stood on the steps, waiting for Maya to return from inside. Around her, the park witnesses dispersed slowly, leaving behind only the memory of what they had seen and the grainy glow of phone videos already making their way across social media. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed like a swarm of gnats. The smell of burned coffee and disinfectant clung to the air, but under it was something sharper, resentment, coiled tight and waiting. Maya walked through the double doors with a gait that was steady, deliberate. She was in full uniform now, badge polished, hair drawn back into a regulation bun, body cam blinking its tiny red light like a heartbeat. Every head in the lobby turned as she entered. Some faces were blank, others openly hostile, a few quietly approving but too careful to show it for long. The air shifted when Captain J.T. Moreland appeared from the hallway. Late 50s, weathered from years on the job, he had a limp from a blown knee in Newark and a look that could silence a squad room without a word. He glanced from Maya to the sealed evidence bag she carried, the confiscated weapons and badges of Officers Brener and Slater, and his jaw tightened. "Tell me you've got this clean," he said in a low voice meant only for her. "We've got it airtight," Maya replied, her voice crisp. "Witnesses, footage, and a miner who recorded the aftermath. It's not just clean, it's undeniable." Moreland exhaled slowly and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "The union's already blowing up my phone. You just made enemies of half this department." Maya didn't blink. "Then I know which half needs watching." Moreland gave her a long look, half warning, half reluctant respect, before stepping aside. IA interview rooms prepped, Slater's inside. The hallway to the interview room was too bright, too sterile, lined with plaques and commendations that gleamed like silent accusations. As Maya passed them, she saw Brener's face staring back from a glossy Officer of the Month photo. She didn't pause, but something in her jaw tightened. That photo would be gone by morning. Inside the small room, Jim Slater sat hunched at the metal table. His uniform shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his face pale, hands twisting together as if trying to wring the guilt out of them. He didn't look up when Maya entered, but when she sat down across from him, the silence became unbearable. "I didn't touch her," he said finally, voice hoarse. "But I didn't stop him either." Maya didn't move, didn't blink. "You laughed," she said quietly. Slater nodded, eyes wet. "Because I didn't know what else to do, because I was scared of him, scared of what it meant if I didn't go along." "Do you understand what that silence cost her?" Maya's voice was soft, but each word landed like a blow. "Yes, ma'am." "Then don't waste it. Speak." Something broke in him then. Words began to pour out. Locker room jokes, late-night patrols where Brener made traffic stops just to harass women, the way he bragged about which ones jumped when he intimidated them. Dates, times, places, enough to turn a single complaint into a pattern of abuse. By the time Maya stepped out of the room, Rowena Fields from Internal Affairs was waiting with a clipboard and sharp eyes. "We've got enough for suspension," she said. "Suspension isn't enough," Maya replied, her tone edged. "We're opening a misconduct investigation and forwarding to the DA's office. This doesn't get buried." Fields studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You've just lit a fuse, Sergeant. Hope you're ready for the blast." Maya glanced back toward the room where Slater sat with his head in his hands. "I've been ready since the first time I had to carry a girl out of a house that was supposed to keep her safe." Outside, Autumn sat in the lobby, hands clasped in her lap, looking smaller under the fluorescent lights than she had at the park bench. When Maya approached, Autumn stood. "You don't have to stay," Maya said gently. "Yes, I do." Autumn's voice was quiet, but there was no tremor in it this time. "If he's going to tell the truth, I'm going to hear it." Maya gave the barest nod. Something passed between them, silent but solid. Through the glass doors, night had fully fallen. Patrol cars lined the lot like sentinels. Somewhere in the city, word of what happened was spreading, faster than the department could contain. For the first time, Luke Brener wasn't in control. And by morning, Palm Hollow would know his name. The laundromat on Ashby Street smelled of bleach and dryer sheets, the hum of machines filling the air with a kind of restless heartbeat. It was the kind of place where people came to keep to themselves, eyes on the spinning drums, secrets buried under fabric softener and small talk. But tonight, it was different. Maya Williams stood near the doorway, dressed down in jeans and a fitted coat, her badge nowhere in sight but her presence unmistakable. She wasn't here as a cop, not exactly. She was here as something heavier, something harder to ignore. A chair had been pulled into the corner for Sharon McBride, who sat stiffly, clutching her purse like a life raft. She had short hair now, lines of exhaustion drawn under her eyes, but there was an alertness to her, like a woman who'd been sleeping with one eye open for 5 years. "You sure this ain't just for the press?" Sharon asked without looking at Maya. "I don't do press," Maya said evenly. "I do truth, even when it hurts." Sharon's jaw flexed. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "They made me feel crazy. Said there was no camera footage. Said I should take it as a compliment. 5 years ago, he pulled me out of my car for a taillight, told me to get out, and then he put his hands where they didn't belong. I filed a complaint. IA told me my story didn't line up with officer behavior. You know what that does to a person? Makes you stop trusting your own memory." Maya didn't interrupt. She just nodded slowly. "They told you that because they didn't want the story to be true." Sharon looked up at her, eyes sharp. "Why now? Why are they listening now?" "Because Autumn Wade wouldn't sit down," Maya said quietly. "And because someone else remembered you didn't deserve to be erased." Sharon sat back, staring at the scuffed tile floor for a long moment. Then she exhaled. "You want me to testify? I want you to be heard." There was a pause, then the smallest nod. Okay. Maya left the laundromat that night with something more powerful than evidence. She left with the first piece of a chorus. Autumn Wade, meanwhile, was waging her own private war. In her small apartment, she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by a mess of sticky notes and index cards. Each one had a name, a memory, a thread she had been given since the park incident went public. Messages from women she didn't even know, high schoolers, waitresses, single moms, all saying the same thing. He scared me. He humiliated me. I thought it was just me. Autumn read them all, some of them twice, her chest tightening. She wasn't a lawyer, wasn't a cop, but she knew she couldn't let those words just sit in her inbox like ghosts. When Maya knocked on her door just past 10 p.m., Autumn didn't hesitate. She let her in, and without preamble, she gestured to the table. "They're scared," Autumn said. "Some of them are kids. One girl told me he used to park near her bus stop when she was 13, asked if she had a boyfriend." Maya's face hardened, but her voice stayed calm. "Is she willing to come forward?" "Not yet. She's not ready." Maya pulled out a chair and sat across from Autumn. "Then we don't rush her, but we don't let her disappear either." Autumn nodded. There was silence for a moment, not empty, but charged. Then Autumn's voice came softer, steadier. "Why do they always think silence means safety?" Maya allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Because they've never heard what silence sounds like when it breaks." That night, Maya stood in her apartment in front of a corkboard she hadn't used in years. She pinned Sharon's name, Autumn's, the bus stop girl's message, Slater's confession, and the veteran's witness statement. She connected them with red yarn until the board began to look less like a random cluster of pain and more like a pattern. Because that's what it was. Luke B. Brener wasn't sloppy. He was deliberate. He didn't slip up. He hunted, and the system, whether out of laziness or fear, had held the door open for him. The next morning, Palm Hollow felt different. Not loud, not riotous, but watchful. At the barber shop on Lincoln Avenue, old men folded their newspapers slower than usual. At Miss Clara's diner, conversations dropped when patrol cars passed outside. Something was moving, something heavy and inevitable. By afternoon, Maya and Autumn sat at a folding table in the back of a community center where someone had brought a pot of coffee and someone else had brought a notebook. And one by one, women came. Some spoke, some just sat in the corner listening, but they came. Each voice added weight until Maya could feel it. Not just a case now, but a tide. "Once this starts rolling," Maya said quietly to Autumn as the last woman left, "it doesn't stop. You sure you're ready for that?" Autumn looked out the window where the sky was darkening into deep indigo. "I'm ready," she said, "because I was 12 the first time someone told me to be quiet. I'm not 12 anymore." Maya nodded, and for the first time since this began, she let herself believe they might actually win. Palm Hollow's City Hall had never felt so full. The marble floors echoed with the scrape of chairs, the rustle of papers, the low hum of voices trying to keep steady. Reporters lined the back wall like vultures with pens, their cameras already rolling before the hearing was called to order. The council chamber smelled faintly of furniture polish and nerves. Autumn Wade sat in the front row, back straight, hands clasped tight in her lap. Her palms were damp, but she kept them still. The weight of every eye in the room pressed down on her, but she refused to shrink. She had shrunk enough for a lifetime. Maya stood at the back of the room, arms folded, expression unreadable. She wasn't here to speak today, not as a cop, not as an enforcer. She was here as a witness, as a presence that said without words, "You are not doing this alone." The gavel cracked against wood, and council chairwoman Elaine Brower, a woman in her late 60s with iron gray hair and a reputation for taking no nonsense, brought the room to order. "We are here to address allegations of misconduct within the 9th District," she said. "This is not a trial, but it is a reckoning." Autumn's heart thudded once, hard. Then she stood when her name was called. The room seemed to tilt slightly as she crossed to the podium. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it was clear enough to cut through the hush. "I was sitting in a public park reading," she said, every word deliberate. "Officer Brener approached me. He asked for my ID, and before I could respond, he used his baton to lift my dress." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the chamber. Autumn kept going. "He smiled when he did it, like it was normal, like I was supposed to laugh. I didn't. I froze. And then I stayed quiet because I thought no one would care. But then Maya showed up." She looked toward the back where Maya stood unmoving, and something inside her spine locked into place. "And I remembered that sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it just shows up and refuses to leave." The room went completely still. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. When Sharon McBride took the podium next, she didn't cry, didn't falter. 5 years ago, he pulled me out of my car during a traffic stop. He said I looked jumpy, told me to step out, and then he searched me in a way that made me feel like less than a person. I filed a complaint. They told me I was exaggerating. I wasn't. Behind her, a woman in a red blouse stood. I remember him from the high school, she said. Her voice trembled but held. He used to wait near the bus stop, asked for my number when I was 13. Then another woman stood, then another. Soon the whole left side of the chamber was on its feet. Waitresses, students, mothers, women who had never thought they'd have the chance to be heard. Maya stepped forward now, not to speak, but to place a folder on the council table. Inside, a dozen affidavits, Slater's signed confession, time-stamped witness statements, and the body cam footage Maya had fought to preserve. Chairwoman Brower read the top page in silence, then looked up, her eyes fierce behind her glasses. For years, she said, this chamber dismissed patterns as coincidences. That ends today. A murmur swept the room, not applause but something heavier, sharper, the kind of sound that meant a city had just taken a deep breath. And at the far back of the room, Luke Brener stood with his attorney, watching the walls close in. For the first time, there was no smirk on his face, only the tight look of a man who knew the ground under him was giving way. Outside City Hall, the crowd that had gathered spilled down the steps and into the square. Someone was live streaming the hearing on a phone, and people were watching in hushed silence as the stories poured out. The city was listening now, and it wasn't going to stop. When the session adjourned, Autumn stepped out into the sunlight with Maya at her side. Reporters shouted her name, microphones thrust forward, but she didn't stop, not yet. On the sidewalk, she finally turned to Maya. That was the first time I said it out loud, she said softly. Maya nodded. How do you feel? Like I just cracked a wall, Autumn said. Maya's expression softened. Walls don't fall all at once, but once they crack, they don't stop. Autumn looked back at the building behind her, City Hall gleaming in the afternoon sun, and for the first time, she didn't feel small in front of it. She felt like she belonged there. Somewhere inside, Brenner's attorney was shouting into a phone. Somewhere else, a union rep was calling an emergency meeting. The machine was grinding, furious, but the sound of women's voices was louder. Palm Hollow had just crossed a line, and there was no going back. The courthouse in downtown Palm Hollow stood like an old sentinel, its columns washed in morning light, the words justice carved above the entrance. Most days, those letters felt like decoration. But today, as the crowd gathered on the steps and news vans lined the curb, they felt like a dare. Inside courtroom 3B, every seat was filled. Survivors sat shoulder to shoulder, some who had spoken, some who still couldn't, but all there to watch. Reporters lined the back wall, their camera lights dimmed, but their pens ready. The tension was a living thing, heavy enough to taste. Luke Brener sat at the defense table in a pressed suit, his tie knotted with military precision. His posture was perfect, but his face was carved into something harder, tighter. He had swapped his badge for cufflinks, but the arrogance was still there, thinned now, frayed at the edges, but present. Autumn Wade sat at the witness stand, hands folded, voice steady as she told her story for the last time. I was sitting on the bench reading. He asked for my ID. Before I could answer, he lifted my dress with his baton. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a joke. It was meant to humiliate me. The defense attorney leaned forward. Miss Wade, he never physically touched you, correct? No, Autumn said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. He didn't need to. What he did was an act of domination. You don't have to touch skin to leave bruises. A ripple of silence went through the courtroom. Not gasps, not murmurs, just stillness so deep it felt like the whole city was listening. Then came Sharon McBride, dressed simply in a gray sweater. Her voice didn't tremble once. 5 years ago, I filed a complaint. They said I was exaggerating. I wasn't, and now I know I wasn't the only one. Then Slater. His hands shook as he adjusted the microphone. I laughed when it happened, he admitted, because I didn't know what else to do, because I was scared of him. But that doesn't excuse it. I failed to protect her. I failed my badge. And I'm here to tell the truth because I can't undo it. But I can stop the lie from standing. The prosecutor, Reva Langston, closed with a quiet, steady voice. This case is not about one incident. It is about a man who used the authority of the badge to prey on those he thought had no voice. He believed they were too scared, too small, too alone to fight back. But he was wrong. Today you have the power to tell him so. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Autumn sat with Maya in the hallway outside the courtroom, vending machine humming behind them. "You did everything right," Maya said softly. "I don't feel brave," Autumn admitted, staring at the tile floor. "Bravery isn't about how you feel," Maya replied. "It's about what you do when you're afraid." The door opened. The jury filed in. The foreperson stood. On the charge of misconduct under color of authority, guilty. On the charge of harassment with intent to degrade, guilty. On the charge of abuse of power, guilty. The air left Autumn's lungs in a single slow exhale. Her hands unclenched on the rail of the witness stand. Brener didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. His jaw worked silently as the bailiff cuffed him and led him away. The sound of the chains was not loud, but it was final. Outside, the courthouse steps were bathed in late afternoon light. Reporters swarmed, microphones flashing, but Autumn didn't stop. She didn't need to. The story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had stood up. That night, she went back to Palm Hollow Park. Not for drama, not for spectacle, but because she needed to see the bench again. Maya met her there, coffee in hand, hair loose for the first time in weeks. Autumn traced her fingers over the worn wood. "You ever think it would end like this?" she asked. "No," Maya said honestly, "but I never thought you'd be the one to finish it either." Autumn smiled faintly. "Neither did I." She sat down, not carefully this time, but with her back straight, like the bench belonged to her now. "I've been thinking," Autumn said quietly. "What if we created something? For girls like me, for women like Sharon, for the ones who aren't ready yet, a place to speak, a place to stand." Maya's smile was small but real. "What would you call it?" Autumn stared out at the lake, the sky turning orange above it. "The silent stand, because that's all I really did. I stood." And she did. 3 weeks later, the park's great maple blazed bright with autumn leaves. Autumn sat beneath it with a folder in her lap, full of sign-ups, 36 names, most of them high school girls, a few older women, some anonymous. Maya joined her on the bench, handing her a lapel pin. Brass, shaped like an open eye. "This belonged to a woman I worked with once," Maya said softly. "She used to say, 'Justice isn't revenge, it's remembering.'" Autumn pinned it to her jacket, then looked out over the park, over the lake where the breeze carried the first cool bite of winter. "Then let's remember," she said. A single leaf spun loose from the maple tree, landing gently on the bench between them, a reminder of where it broke and where it began again.